All right, can you guys hear me? All right.
Yes.
Perfect. I hear yes. Hey there, Homer.
Who are you on the phone with?
I called in.
Oh.
Otherwise, it'll be too loud. My phone has noise canceling.
Yeah, so's mine. Hey,
So I'm out and about.
who's taking the minutes?
That should be our secretary. So hopefully he'll be here any minute. We'll wait a couple more minutes, see if anyone else joins us.
Ralph is going to join. How you doing, Mr.
Yeah, Ralph
Cosey?
Yeah, well, we haven't heard you yet, buddy. Can you speak up maybe on the phone? Phone muted. Yeah, well, we cannot hear you. Two devices.
If Wilt's dialed in, we should be seeing a phone number on the list. I'm not seeing an extra phone number participant.
No, there's no phone number associated with this. He is in on the Teams app on his phone.
Okay.
And the Teams app on his computer. So I think he said his microphone is not working on his computer.
Is that the same thing with Ralph last night?
Yeah, I guess it could be. Yeah, Ralph was having issues last night as well. So we'll give it another 3 minutes. We'll wait till 5 after.
Okay, so if the app is handling both the phone and the computer, he's showing is muted.
Yeah, well, we can't. Can you verify that it's unmuted? Maybe try video if you're willing to show video for a second to see if that pops up. Videoing phone. I see, Steve, you joined twice on the phone, maybe, and on your computer?
No, I just logged back out and tried to log back in
Got it.
to see if I could get it to move.
Okay. All right, so Will just left. He's going to try to come back and see if we can get this to work.
What I'm confused on is why it's showing a microphone for some and others it's not.
They have him muted.
Yeah, but I'm talking about the icon out to the side.
You mean like,
Like Eric's or Rob Hansen's.
all right, so I see a little muted button next to Rob and Eric. I do not see one next to Mark. I'm
That's
not
my
sure if Mark is muted or not. I would assume not, since he doesn't have a little mute button. Hey.
Hey.
What's up, Mark? Welcome to the party.
I'm not muted. Can you hear me?
We can loud and clear, man. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, see, I have no microphone.
Oh, really? Until you turn on video and then it works?
No, I still don't have a microphone. I don't see a microphone for me, Homer, or you, Rob.
Ah, yeah. I think it's because we are not muted. So as soon as I mute, here, let's see. I don't want to mess this up. If I'm muted on my
try.
Yep. Yeah, you now have a little mute icon. So
Yep.
Yep. So Will's back. He still says he's muted.
Plonsky, for some reason, it was having me approve people come in.
Yep, I've been approving everyone that came in.
Okay.
So I have non-discriminatorily been approving everyone. All right, it's 5 after. Will keep messing around. You are the presenter though, so it's going to be kind of tough for you to type everything you want us to hear. So I'm not sure that's going to work too well, but we'll figure it out. So all right, 5:35. Let's go ahead and call this meeting to order. As you know, I'm the incumbent, I guess the new president this year. So I'll go ahead and pull up my agenda real quick. We'll go over what we need to for our meeting. So Ralph, did you make it to the call? No. Eric, you said we had what, 23 members this year? Eric, going once. Did you walk away from the computer, buddy? Maybe you did. All right. So he texted me earlier. He said, I think we had 23 or 25 members of our chapter. Ralph has graciously volunteered to be our membership chair. So as soon as Ralph comes in and has his audio working, he'll give us a little update there. Our corporate sponsors, Foster Engineering, Legrand Engineering, and Compass Engineering. I didn't see McCall and Sons, but I'm sure they're incoming very soon. They have been very faithful members of our chapter for quite a long time. So going on from now, let's go to the meeting minutes that were in the newsletter. Hopefully everyone saw that I sent out. So if I can get a motion to approve the meeting minutes from July.
I'll make the motion.
All right, can I get a second? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, 3 ayes. Ayes take it. Let's move on to the treasury report. There was a newsletter for this month. If I can get a motion to accept that into the record.
I'll make it.
Second.
This is Homer.
All right.
I haven't looked at it. So.
No, you'll second sight unseen.
No, I'm not going to second because I haven't looked at it.
All right.
Second.
All right, perfect. Rob Hansen seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Perfect. All right, that passes without issue. So let's go into old business. So as I mentioned earlier, there are the new officers, myself as president. We have Steve, who is our VP. So Steve, wave to everybody. Mr. Homer. Is that what is Homer? Is that just your middle name or? Sure, you're muted. We can't hear you.
I said it's just a joke. That way people don't know who I am and I can be anonymous and
Anonymity. I like
yeah.
it. All right. Camera's kind of hard to be anonymous with a camera, but
Yeah, but no, a lot of people don't know me by face either, so that's fine.
all right. So Steve's our VP. We have Eric Mondor, our treasurer, once again. So thank you very much for going in, Eric. And Willie Ramos, supposed to be our secretary. I don't see him on the line yet. Willie, are you there? Going once, going twice. No Willie. So Willie is our secretary. Ralph is kind of the backup to that, although Ralph isn't here either. So I'll stand in for that. I'll go ahead and take meeting minutes for this meeting, since I already have an outline for this presentation. Let's go on to the chapter service project. So as everyone knows, we had Mercy Ministries, and that was going well for so long, and then it sort of just kind of nosedived. And last I heard, they've been fighting with the city to get approvals, to get things moving forward. And I think COVID just really complicated things. So I have not been able to get any progress in that. So in the meantime, kind of going forward with the worst case scenario, assuming it doesn't move forward, we are actively looking for a new service project. So I know, Steve, you mentioned you've reached out to a few people. So if any of you guys know of anyone that is looking for our services, that they could use us as a chapter for either an install or a design or something we can do for our community, please speak up, reach out to one of the officers or myself and let us know so that we can get engaged in our community. We have not, along the same lines, going on to new business, we haven't gotten what the chapter review is going to be next year. So as you know, we fill out there's a form we fill out every year to tell National what we've been engaged in and what we've got accomplished over the past year. And we don't know what that form is going to look like next year. With COVID, there are so many unknowns. We've been asking for it, but we have not yet received that form. And typically what we try to do is we try to structure the stuff that our chapter does in alignment with that to ensure we get the Gold Chapter Excellence Award every year. And without that, without knowing what they're looking for, their expectations, we're just going to go with what we had last year. So again, that's why we're looking for a service project so we can stay engaged and stay active. We've got the SFPE North American Conference coming up. That is going to be entirely virtual. I personally have not seen anything official on that. Have any of you? I know, Steve, you mentioned that you talked to someone.
It actually came out
Today,
a little while ago for the sign up, for the registration.
Perfect. It
Email
did.
just
Okay,
dropped.
awesome.
Yep.
Outstanding. Can one of you guys tell me what it said? Unfortunately, I don't know.
There's basically the link to go sign up. You know, start out the same as the others. This is virtual, but the first day is free. I think the 8th, and then the other 2 days are there's a fee. But when you go to the sign up page, you pick and choose, you know, what you want, like in the past. But the fee's not the same. So.
Okay. What is the fee? Just a few $100s? I mean.
Yeah, I think I didn't look at it in a great amount of detail, but it was.
Did we just lose Homer?
Yeah, I think we lost him.
Yeah. Yeah, $250 for members, $299 non. Yeah.
$250 and $299.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. That'll be interesting. I'm wondering how they kind of work that out at National. There are a lot of legal issues with going virtual. So at every conference, and this is every conference, they have an option for vendors to buy in for the next year, and they offer them kind of a discount if you buy it a year early. However, with that purchase comes a certain level of expectation of engagement in the community, and face-to-face interaction is paramount with a lot of these companies. So I think that was one of the major delays of getting this virtual conference out, was trying to work through all the legalities of that. I'm kind of curious what they're going to do next year, because that fee is pretty low. So hopefully we have a lot of people attend. So I'd encourage everyone, you know, 250, 300, whether you're a member or not. You should probably be a member of National, but if you're not, 300 is still pretty reasonable for a few days of really great presentation. We have the South Carolina Engineering Conference and Trade Expo, which is coming up in 2021. So that is June 3rd through 5th. I was going to pass off to Ralph and see if he's had any contact with them. Typically, it's 6 to 8 months before they kind of reach out and we get engaged. We had a spot this year, and then they dropped us because they went virtual. So hopefully next year, they're currently planning on meeting face-to-face. So hopefully next year we can get a track and we can get some presenters out there next year. So again, that's going to be June 3rd through the 5th. We did get, Rob Hanson, please forgive me if you already mentioned this. We did get the Gold Chapter Excellence Award for, what is it, the 15th year? 16 years?
It might be 16.
16 years. All right. So we got the Gold Chapter Excellence Award again. We're not entirely sure how they're going to do that. Typically, it's handed out in person at the SFPE North American Conference. But, you know, with us going virtual, I'm not sure how that's going to work. But we'll get it in the mail. We'll add to the list of all the other ones we have. And for those of you that don't know or don't remember, we are the longest running Gold Chapter Excellence Award chapter in the world. So we have had it every year since it started. So Rob, good work for you for keeping that going, man, because if we lost it under your watch, I would not want to be you.
Good work to you, everyone.
Yeah.
And good luck to you for the COVID award.
Yeah, well, you know, what's great is that, you know, we are actually meeting virtually. So this is going to be very helpful. I've spoken to a few other presidents out there, and they're still in turmoil. They're not sure what to do. Some have moved forward in virtual meetings. Others have not at all. So we are very fortunate to have a fairly active community and the capabilities to go virtual. So thank you everyone that have kind of participated and joined. This is pretty awesome. I've actually reached out, and something that I would like to do, I mentioned this at the officers meeting that we had, the kickoff meeting, is that I'd like for us to maybe link up with the other virtual meetings that we have at the other chapters, and perhaps ask some representatives of our chapter to attend some of the other meetings to kind of feed that information back to us. So, you know, we got to realize, you know, fire protection is a very small community, and the resources we have at our disposal are pretty amazing. So if we can kind of collectively reach out and join the other meetings, I think it'd be very powerful to bring that back and then to contribute towards their meetings as well. So be on the lookout for that. I'm going to be looking for that. At the last officers meeting, I did mention that, you know, and I don't think I mentioned this in the newsletter, that we talked about having a face-to-face barbecue. So as you know, let me see if I can present this. Hold on. Right. It's going to show you guys the survey responses. I was going to sort of save this to the last, but I'm giving Will all the opportunity I can to get his voice working. Give me a second.
Hey Rob.
Yep.
Just so you know, the full conference price is $250, and the just the conference piece is $150. So full conference for the business meeting and everything is $250, and the other is just $150.
All right, what's the 150 get you then?
That's a day.
Just the conference piece, not the business meeting, not the, you know, that piece of it.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you. All right. Can everyone see the survey? Question 1, which topics?
Yes.
Yes. Perfect. All right. So to be honest, I didn't really plan it this way, but it actually worked out quite well. SFPE did put out in the last year and a half the what is expected to the core competencies of a fire protection engineer. So for those of you that don't know, SFPE has taken upon themselves to kind of define that. So there are 10 core competencies that they have listed, and that was what was in the questionnaire that I sent out. I asked everyone to kind of rate what they wanted to see. So on a scale of 1 to 10, and we got 10 participants, which is pretty good for a survey, to be honest with you, with our group. So we got 10 people to come in and chime in, and it was more or less pretty even. So as you can see, we had passive protection, and Will Cosey, as soon as he can get his audio working, he'll go over the presentation on these various core competencies and where they come from, what they mean. And our goal is to hopefully present information every month at our technical topics that are in alignment with what you guys want to see. Right. So now hopefully you can have a little more voice in what we're presenting. Steve is taking that to heart. I think he's already set up someone for passive for the, what is it, in October, Steve?
No, it's December is where I'm leaning towards.
Perfect. All right.
Because so, we have STI coming for October. That was through Ralph. That's the passive.
Yep. Perfect. So we're going to try to hit all of these, all the top hitters. I mean, I was kind of surprised to find out that it was more or less, I was not a wide distribution here. It's actually pretty narrow. So just goes to show you that I guess everyone's interested in everything. So the next question I had relates to next month. At the officers meeting, we talked about possibly having a barbecue or some other face-to-face event. In light of COVID, I did ask how many of you are willing to meet up. Of the 10 participants in the first question, I only had 5 in question number 2, which is a little surprising because it was yes or no, but 5 people chimed in. 3 said yes, they're willing to attend. 2 said no. Of those, all 5 did in fact give some responses as to what they were looking for. If we were to meet face-to-face, by and large, social distancing was pretty important. One individual, I think it might even been Mr. Hansen, said the virus is completely fake. So that was kind of entertaining.
That's fake news. I did not write that.
No, that's fake news. All right. Well, I won't show who it was then. So we've been looking at venues, and unfortunately, the states are requiring 10 or fewer people at the various locations that we're looking to go, even in parks. So we're tossing around the idea of having it possibly in my backyard, which I did a couple years ago, and I'm willing to do again. But it's got to be something the chapter wants to do. So does anyone on the call today have an opinion or a desire for next month? If you'd like to meet together to have a little barbecue face to face, even if it's a small gathering, so long as it's outside and we have adequate controls for social distancing and sanitizing.
Rob, did you contact Odell Weeks here in Aiken?
I talked to the city of Aiken, Mark.
Okay.
And they're the ones that are telling me, them and the county both. And obviously it's, they're looking at the rates. It's changing by the day, the week, and the hour, obviously. But as of last Thursday, Friday, that was where they were at.
Okay.
So you forgot to ask the other question. How many had shovels?
Shovels.
Your backyard support program?
Yeah, if we can't find a service project, I've got a water issue. I get a lot of water running over my property, so I'm gonna ask everyone to bring a shovel and just start digging. And we're gonna divert the water to my neighbor's yard. We're gonna let him figure it out. So, all right. Well, so do you guys have an opinion? Mark, Rob, you guys are on the call. Cosey, if you can speak up. Hanson.
I'd be out, but.
Out. All right.
Mark, Eric.
I'd be willing to go to an in-person meeting. I went to one Sunday, and at Hopeland Gardens, and we had probably 50 people or more. So,
really,
yeah.
But that's a private garden, right?
No, it was donated to the city of Aiken.
Yeah, what I was getting at is I was trying to understand who runs the place. Is it the city or is it?
Yes, the city. Yeah. The rye patch, I think, might be privately owned, but the gardens itself are public.
Well, I can certainly call back and ask again. I don't have a problem doing that.
Hopeland's Gardens wouldn't let you have a barbecue there, but
No, I mean as far as the requirement.
yeah.
All right, that's good to know. Now, if we had a barbecue, would you, those that are on the call, would you be comfortable with the chapter providing the food and cooking it on the grill? Collectively, would you rather bring your own food? I mean, do you guys have an opinion on the matter? Having it catered? Or no food at all and just drinking some beer and hanging out over a fire?
I would be okay with the chapter providing food and cooking it collectively.
Okay. So Will, you chimed in, you said you're ready to go. Do you have an opinion on the matter? He's good with catering. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we are in the presence of greatness. Mr. Tom Allison just joined us. Tom, are you on the line?
Yes, I am.
Welcome, my friend. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. If we had a barbecue, we were just talking about that next month. Is that something you might attend or be willing to attend in person?
Yeah. Any ideas where?
Well, it would likely be possibly at my house, or we're looking at other venues. We just talked about this, but the venues that are open in the city and the county are they're limiting it to 10 or fewer people. So Mark did say that he was up in Aiken and they had a number of people, I think 50 plus, right? At their little fiesta. So Aiken might be a little more open than they have been telling us that they are, but Steve said he's going to call around and see what's available and see what we can get working. So we're looking at next month.
Are you Columbia County or are you Richmond County?
I am Richmond.
Okay, I'm Columbia. I don't think we have that restriction.
So we're looking at so I think for your own personal property, you have that flexibility. We were calling around to parks and trying to get some public space available. So I went over the questionnaire I sent out, and the second question was related to barbecue or some type of face-to-face event, since we've all been virtual and we're all probably going crazy being at home. And the most common response I got from those that responded in relation to the things they wanted to see if we were to meet face-to-face, well, was open space. So people wanted to have the capability for social distancing. So that's why we were looking at a park or something else that was very open. In lieu of that, I'm willing to host it in my backyard. It's going to be bring a shovel and start digging. We're going to have a little digging party, or we can have it at your place if you want to host it as well. So we can talk about that offline. No sense in working that out since we're both really close to each other. So, all right. So it sounds like next month, and we're going to have a social event. So look for that information over the next week and a half. We'll either have it in Aiken or Augusta, depending on what we can get going, and then we'll just go from there. So I don't think I had any other new business. We did have quite a bit that we discussed over the officers meeting. I'm not going to bore all of you all with that information. One thing I did ask the officers to do is look over our bylaws. They have not been updated in a number of years. I think the last time they were updated, Jason Butler was the president, if I remember right, and he proposed an update. No one even knew what he was doing, and we all agreed. So who knows what's in there, but he had it changed. So I'm going to I asked the officers to look at that. We're going to propose a change to our bylaws to kind of better define some of the roles, responsibilities, add flexibility for this telework and telecommuting and remote meetings, virtual meetings, and then try to shore up some of the flexibility we have to better define what our chapter is. We also need to reflect the fact that we're an incorporated chapter, and there is some cleanup housekeeping issues we need to take care of as well while we do that. So be on the lookout for that information. If you want to take a look at the bylaws and propose changes, you're more than welcome to. Obviously, that's what we do as a community. So
Could you
is there
send the
any?
latest? Could you send the latest bylaws out?
Hey, Mark, tell you what, man, I can, but you can also, our website has a link to the
Okay.
latest bylaws that were last approved. So I will send out an email letting everyone know that we're going to open them up for revision. And so I think the process is we have to approve them at a chapter level, and then they have to be sent to headquarters. And headquarters actually has to review and approve them before we can implement them. So just be advised, if there's something you want to have added or changed, headquarters definitely has the final say. That was changed in the last few years. So just because we want it, that doesn't mean they're going to let us have it. So just be aware of that. So I'll send out an email informing everyone of this kind of opening up the bylaws for revision, and I'll attach it so everyone can see it and knows what we're doing. Will is requesting if someone can call his phone on audio and then take control of the slides. I can do that, but it is a bit noisy. So in order for me to have the audio working, I would have to turn on my computer microphone, which does not have the noise canceling capabilities. And it's going to be very, very noisy. So is there anyone else in the audience that is willing to act in that capacity?
I could try that.
Was that you, Mark?
Yeah, I could try that.
All right. And there's Will sending out his phone number. So sign him up for anything that you want.
Let me plug in here.
Hey, Mark, your email is not auto-populating. I'm going to send you the, unless you already have it. Did he send it to you already? Will, have you sent him to Mark?
To what? I see his phone number. He typed it in there.
Yeah. So he's going to send you the slides.
Oh,
And then-
okay.
Yep, and
Hey.
have you kind of punch along.
Okay.
I'll take this off speaker, that way we don't have feedback.
Will, go ahead and say something.
Yeah, I heard him.
Test.
Can y'all hear him?
Yeah, if you want to turn off.
Or close to the microphone.
Yeah, hey Mark, if you want to turn down the speakers on your computer,
Okay.
then we will not get. Well, then you're not going to hear the present. Well, you will hear the presentation. Just you won't
I'll
hear
hear
us.
him. I won't hear anybody's comments.
Correct. So. All right. So, but before we move on, if I can get if there's any new business on the floor, I'm asking, not telling. Is there any new business on the floor? Going once, going twice. Negative. All right. So if I can get a motion to close the business meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Perfect. All right. Meeting is now closed. I'll go ahead and pass it off to Mr. Mark if you want to take it on. And Will, thank you very much for presenting this evening. Everyone, Will Cosey. He's over at Savannah River Site, fire protection engineer, and he's going to talk about, well, I'll let you go from here. You got the floor, man. Thank you.
All right, good afternoon or good evening, everyone. Get through this, putting the phone down. So I'm going to deal with the echo. Hopefully you're not having to deal with an echo. Tonight we're going to cover the fire protection core competencies to practice in the practice of fire protection engineering. So if you would Rob, do you have control of the slides? We can just put the slides up.
Looks like he's got it.
So does everyone see the slides? I'm still seeing pictures of everyone else.
I see the slides.
Yeah, well, we can see the slides, buddy. It says FPE technical core competency. That's gone now.
Very good. So on slide 2,
Now I don't.
the FPE
Yeah, hold on. Mark,
technical core
let's start it
competencies
again.
by James Bassett and Ben Brooks. So I'm using a slide presentation that was created by the CBQ team in the proliferation of the ideas that were put all together for this presentation. So what I'm also using is the handout that you can find on the Society of Fire Protection Engineers website. It's titled the recommended minimum technical core competencies for the practice of fire protection engineering. Sorry, I'm still having to work through a little bit of the echo. I'll make it smoother here as we go along. All right, go ahead and go to the next slide.
We haven't, we're not seeing the slide being presented. All I'm seeing is Mark's face.
I'll take it. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
We got it now.
There we go.
All right. So what, instead of next slide, just say slide number. Just give a number and I'll go to it. Cool. All right.
So how this arrived was the Society of Fire Protection Engineers and their core competencies and the professional qualifications identified that there's a lack of professional recognition for fire protection engineering in a number of regions, not just in the United States. And some of the requirements are varied regardless of what region you're in, or depending upon what region you're in. Guys, I apologize. I'm still trying to work with this little bit of an echo here. What this document does is it advocates for a minimum of recommendation of core competencies in the practice of fire protection engineering. It's not intended to be a certification or requirements document, at least not yet. So what I mean by that is that there has been some discussions within the Society of Fire Protection Engineers as to whether or not they're going to become a micro-credentialing organization. So the discussions have taken place, and they are still ongoing. But we're not to the point where we're going to act like a NICET or anything else like that. So, also with identifying the core competencies, we also identified there's a deficiency in understanding what constitutes a competent engineer. There's no harmonized level for competent fire protection engineering. One fire protection engineer on the East Coast may differ from those on the West Coast, even in their fundamental principles. So this was an effort in conjunction with the higher education group to develop a minimum technical core competencies for the practice of fire protection engineering. Go ahead and go to slide 4. Sorry, I was looking at another. So I briefed on these to provide a set of universally recognized minimum criteria, which are utilized globally to ensure that a suitably high level of quality is maintained within the fire protection engineering profession and its related activities. So this doesn't go to the point of identifying a master or someone that's with an extensive SME level of competencies. This is a generic core level competencies to introduce many of the subjects and the activities of fire protection engineer. It's designed to identify just the core competency, core knowledge and skills areas, and the corresponding experience and duration associated with those experiences that would help a fire protection engineer to be able to practice in that specific area. So we also have to acknowledge the fact that engineer is a term that's used differently throughout the U.S. as well as internationally. within the U.S., there are some states that will allow someone to be called an engineer right out of graduating with an engineering degree. There are other states, such as those that we're located in here, you cannot be calling yourself an engineer without having a PE or practicing under a licensed fire protection engineer by firm. So there are many different ways that you can be called an engineer. Fundamentally, the educational requirements of an engineer are acknowledged and assumed within this document. What this document does is it builds on those levels of academic experience. So you can see the last line there says to clearly identify knowledge area and experience, minimum technical competencies that are core to fire protection engineering. Okay, go ahead to the next slide. The document, as I mentioned, is on the Society of Fire Protection Engineers. You can do a quick word search on technical core competencies, and it is in the drop-down list on the main page. You can actually pull that up, do a review of it yourself. This was the initial document, the initial revision. We are actually in the process of revising this document to further identify core competencies in the practice of specific areas. For example, explosion protection, passive fire barriers, and integration with structural engineers. So there's additional activity and work being put into this document. Okay. Under the scope of this document, it's a recommended minimum technical competencies for the practice of fire protection engineering. Again, it does not say the minimum technical competencies of a fire protection engineer, the practice of fire protection engineering. I know it seems like splitting the hairs associated with how that's applied, but those that are practicing engineers versus those that are engineers working under the provisions of a licensed fire protection engineer by firm, you can see that there's specifically a difference. This outlines the structure of the education and specific knowledge and skill areas and requirements for a company applied experience. What do I mean by that? I'll explain in just a minute when it starts showing hours towards areas of study or gaining experience, applied experience. So this one goes on to talk about the differences globally in the note in this slide. It talks about fire protection engineering versus fire safety engineering versus fire engineering. There's safety engineers that are located globally. This term is identified and encompassed by this note so that only fire protection engineering will be the one used to describe these levels of practicing, academic accomplishment, and competency development. Go ahead to the next slide. So the fire protection engineer, this includes the identification of hazards, characterization of risk. They design safeguards that aid in preventing, controlling, and mitigating effects of fires. In general, that's a description of a fire protection engineer, a fire safety engineer, a fire engineer globally, without regard to the title of a person that's provided these levels of activity. So that was a unified position on the definition of a fire protection engineer. In the next box, they utilize and develop engineering methods and techniques. That's what sets us aside from just a fire safety professional to become an engineer. We also are required to have formal training as well as professional experience before we begin testing or certifications associated with our practice in fire protection engineering. It doesn't, the document also acknowledges that there are current industry practitioners who are competent fire protection engineers and possess the appropriate level of knowledge, skill, and experience, regardless of whether they follow this path prescribed by this document to obtain competencies. This is not retracting from, it's only setting the bar at the next level associated with our engineering practices. This is the core, so what we're working towards is the core to the practice of fire protection engineering and what's obtained upon the completion of structured education in specific knowledge and skill areas to accompany that applied experience to provide a competency that's sets a standard globally that people that utilize this information in this document to higher, correct level of practitioner or the experience and the academic progress in the areas that they need. So finally, in the last box there, expected to have an interdisciplinary role assisting project design teams to fulfill life safety, property protection, and environmental goals. This is just a tie-in statement that a fire protection engineering cuts a swath across all levels of engineering under design, startup, construction, and phase of a project or a engineering activity. So where does this particular document apply? It applies in the U.S., but done so as a cluster of activities, a cluster of related knowledge, skills, abilities that affects a major part of one's job or your role and responsibility. What you see here in this slide, on slide 8, as you see, it provides the various different tiers. This also assumes the educational activities performed under university studies at that tier 1 level. Your learning, your professionalism, integrity, adaptability, reliability, and lifelong learning. In the tier 2, in the general academics, reading, writing, math, science, communication, computer skills, and as such. Where this document holds is in tier 5. You're beyond just a developing engineer. You're specifying your engineering knowledge and competency towards a fire protection engineering activity. They include 4 specific categories. Those categories are fire science, human behavior and evacuation, fire protection systems, and safety analysis. So it seems as though we've gotten these categorized a little bit differently than the NESIS testing standard. Yes, we are. Because the NESIS is not applicable globally. We have to back up to what is basic to a fire protection engineer. Science, people, systems, and analysis. So if you really broke those 4 pieces down, you back it up to what the basics of those are. Go ahead to the next slide. Guys, I also want to take a second right here and tell you that this is not a typical presentation for me. The echo is really causing me to second guess my words and stumble through some of this, so I apologize.
Will, do you have your sound turned off?
I've got the sound on my phone turned off, but the sound on the presentation so I can see as we progress there and hear you guys when you talk. Should I make you go backwards?
Will, I
I
think
was thinking if you
are you muted on your end?
mute the computer, mute your computer.
Okay, now try. So the only person I'll hear now is Mark. I don't hear anyone from the presentation.
They'll have to raise their hand.
Okay, so I'll go through the presentation like this. So I don't have to. It does provide a measure of ease of presenting the subject because I don't have the echo now. So let me do that. Application. So the foundation is in the academic preparation at any institution accepted standing. What it means is this goes back to some of the statements that we've all heard about being ABET accredited and so on and so forth that we've heard of in the United States. So the institution of an accepted standing is obviously just trying to set the bar associated with your academic preparation or a fire protection engineer's academic preparation in the development of your physical sciences, your mathematics, your computation and your calculations, your analysis, your logical thinking, and so on and so forth. So as I go in your communications, of course, as well as your computer skills. So that's the foundation that it goes through an assumption that you will have that as a basis. Then it wants to build upon the experience by providing you with opportunities or evaluating you in responsible charge. But it also wants to make sure that this is a diverse. Again, this is not to to pigeonhole anyone or to provide a specification associated with a specific area in fire protection engineering. This is to provide a well-rounded core level of competencies for a fire protection engineer to go about developing their competency in a broad spectrum or diverse, progressively in complexity, a development of knowledge and understanding. As you can see, that second bullet goes through and tries to describe. I try to put in my own words to help you see how that's applicable. The competencies are independent of geographical location, as I mentioned to you. It provides that level basis of a West Coast engineer seeing 2,000 hours in passive fire protection engineering requirement as same as an East Coast engineer would, the same as one that's coming out of Venezuela or Spain. So that level of competency can be understood with a document that's like this if it's used to identify core competencies for the technical professional fire protection engineer. It also allows for a reference of practitioners to structure their professional development. So those of us that are fire protection engineers or working towards our own credentialing of what have you, or maybe you're looking to specialize in a certain area, it can provide additional references for that particular practitioner to structure yours or our development. Employers or other organizations can also use this document, as I mentioned, to at least identify minimally qualified candidates that they're looking forward to hire to work in certain areas and specialties. In a lot of cases, folks that are hiring fire protection engineers just know it as someone working in fire protection without an understanding of what all the aspects are. This helps them to identify what some of those minimum qualities that they might look for. Educational institutions might reference this, but they should by and far go back to the SFPE published higher education model curricula that's out there. Next slide. This definitely helps. Okay, technical knowledge. As I mentioned to you, we'll break it down into the science of fire, the people in a fire, the systems in a fire, and the analysis. So this is upper level definitions. I don't have to read too much into it. Once you take the document down and you read through it, you'll see that this is really a fundamentals and a principled approach toward identifying the competency levels in these four particular categories and areas for a practicing fire protection engineer. And in just a minute, we'll break down even further. So fire science, what does that entail? It's a comprehensive understanding of the underlying physical principles of fire and its related mechanisms. Human behavior and evacuation, just as you might think. The principal means of egress associated with getting people out of the area, and their human behavior when they're in an emergent situation. Fire protection systems, just that. What systems provide mitigation, water, non-water, detection and alarm, the smoke management, the passive features associated with it, and all its assembly to become a passive system. Then in addition to that, the ITM, the inspection, test, and maintenance associated with it, and use of model codes, whether it be the IFC or whether it be NFPA in the United States, or there are several others in the EU that they've tried to set in place as what they'll use as model codes. Or in some cases, they adopt the United States standards in one form or another, whether it's NFPA or the IFC. Fire protection analysis. This obviously is the analysis section. This is our principles of technical analysis, such as our fire analysis. We go through looking at the way things burn, the heat release rates, impingements, things of that nature as we get further into the engineering applied and the mathematical side of analysis of fire protection. Go ahead to the next slide. So in this slide, it's a little bit small. You might zoom in just a little bit. If you would, just control and scroll that thing down so you might be able to a little bit easier to view for those on there. So these are the technical competencies. They're not relating the hours yet because in some cases there's a lot more availability of professional development in one region of the world than another. But these are some basic areas within those four major categories as we talked about. In fire science, heat transfer. Heat transfer includes heat transfer and fluid flow and all the studies associated with it. Some of your basic thermodynamic parts, fire chemistry, compatible and non-compatible materials. I can go further into details. I just want to make sure we get to the main topic. So fire dynamics, fire growth rates, heat release rates. There's even discussion about testing apparatus and some of the features associated with that. They're in the fire science. Human behavior and evacuation. So human behavior evacuation is just that. Obviously, we're putting a lot more emphasis on that nowadays, especially when with the various different accidents we've had of late. Human behavior, whether it's a verbal alarm in our mass communication systems, or whether it's still tone and light, or something visible. Egress and life safety design concepts, occupant loading, capacity of egress components, lots of the pieces and parts that you find in a fire protection engineer to become proficient in certain general areas and aspects. Fire protection systems. These are the higher categories of the systems as start going through them. They're not to the detailed level, whether it's a FIKE suppression system or a clean agent or things of that nature. This is on the higher level of the categories associated with systems: passive systems, active systems, fire detection and alarm. It doesn't say BESDA. It doesn't go into heat or smoke. It's just fire detection and alarm, fire suppression, obviously, whether it's wet pipe or dry pipe or pre-action, so on and so forth. What type of sprinkler heads? That's the level that the time spent in these different areas are expected to bring about in familiarity for a competent fire protection engineer. Fire protection analysis. Obviously, with this being an engineering field, there's a lot more of the performance-based design. What's the basis of some of those requirements? And if we perform the level of safety associated within that design, do we meet the intent or the requirements associated with protecting the property, protecting the people? And of course, we've got a lot of performance-based experts in our area in this chapter that can provide some additional information associated with that. But there are some base-level competencies that are being developed right now in the next revision to show where those hours can be spent to help develop competencies, as well as the rest of these that you see in this list. Smoke management, evacuation analysis, RSET, ASET, RSET, which ties into the human behavior, and that was an acknowledgement in the next revision. Structural fire protection, which could even be critical temperatures and concrete spalling and things of that nature that a fire protection engineer should be aware of. Risk management, numerical methods, and computer fire modeling, CFAST, and several different other opportunities that are out there for computer fire modeling. Building and fire regulations and standards. This one is your code jockey. Without mincing words, the last one is your code jockey. In a lot of areas where we are as fire protection engineers, we can find ourselves interpreting codes, applying codes, investigating, inspecting, providing assessments of, and working through our building and fire regulations and standards as they're applied per the requirements of that jurisdiction. That's what this element, this bullet, is meant to capture. Okay, next slide. So the model that was used to develop the competency timeline, it provides a recommended range of hours that are considered needed to gain a comprehensive understanding and knowledge in areas. Now, obviously, you can work in a specific field and say you spent 2,000 hours, like trying to develop your project management professional certification, and you really only applied to two or three projects. In this area, what we're looking for is to gain the minimum knowledge to be able to support and provide information and the practice of fire protection engineering in these areas. The ranges of recommended hours are based on input from the academic communities, including our higher education in the Society of Fire Protection Engineers, as well as Europe, and using the European Credit Transfer Accumulation System. It's a real thing. It basically looks at what type of credits can be gained, but either way, from the U.S. to the European level of accreditation for fire protection engineers and vice versa, mainly based on traditional academics, the universities and things of that nature. But in some cases, they do take credit for continuing developing hours, or PDUs, professional development hours, and identifying some of the hours toward learning. The main reason why this was brought up as using it as a comparison is, as you see there in the quotations, the volume of learning based on the defined learning outcomes and their associated workload. What does that mean? We want to make sure that the work that's being done is to get the end result. Where the workload indicates the time students typically need to complete all learning activities such as lectures, seminars, project, practical work, self-study, and examinations. In most cases, the definition of a fire protection engineer considers both the study of and the testing for the fundamentals of physical sciences, mathematics, chemistry, and some of the other pieces and parts that I don't go too far into detail with. This is the time that it's looking at trading the hours of the time in for the traditional lecture, seminars, projects, practical work, and so on and so forth. These are required to speed the learning outcomes or the objectives if you're working in those areas. Knowledge areas and suggested range of hours are not intended to show what subjects that must be included or hours instructed in academic or education degree program. It's not the same what we have in the U.S. versus what's available in the European areas versus what's available in Spain or France, for example. Okay, next slide. And you might want to zoom in on that one. What you'll see is the typical hours that have been identified for the various different specific areas. For example, if you look at the minimum competency that's recommended in the knowledge area of fire science associated with heat transfer is 120 to 160 hours. That's the recommendation, 120 to 160. So you consider a 40-hour work week, and you break that down, you can see that it really doesn't take a whole lot of time to actually obtain some of these minimum level of competencies, but it's identified for candidates such that are faster learners than others, or maybe pick up the concepts, but it also requires for the skill, the work in the area, not just those that can pick up a concept, but the application of it. And that's what the intent is, to have not just the time in learning the concept or applying the concept, but using the concept in the interconnected ways in which we do, such as in the fire protection analysis. So in the same way that you'll look at heat transfer and the time that you'll spend in the recommended hours of 120, 160, you may need that when you're doing the evacuation analysis down the fire protection analysis section, or during that 120 hours to 160 hours, or the performance-based design and the 160 to 200 hours that are required there. So there is a little bit of an overlap, and that's the reason why in this next revision, they're providing some additional information as to how some of those overlaps are mitigated by specifying what some of the minimum competencies or core understandings and applications are needed inside of performance-based design. So there's a further bullet expansion that's happening for the next revision of this core technical competencies, the practice of fire protection engineering. This being an initial document, it provides a surface level or a 5,000-foot level, if you will, identification of what are some of the hours that should be expected for the minimum competency in this for passive fire systems. What are the minimum competencies that should be required in human behavior and physical response to fire? Egress and life safety design, calculating occupancy loads, or calculating a common path of travel, and how does that apply? Maybe even in relation to the active system that's in there for a fire suppression system, and it's with having an active fire suppression system and how that changes it. So, as you can see, it's an initial swath at the hours associated with these, utilizing the educational credit transfers between both the United States and other global candidates in the area of fire protection engineering. Next slide. Before I move on with this experience side, so what you'll see in the discussion of in those areas those are target time in working with passive fire protection features that we might ask a junior engineer to develop in before expecting some level of competency there in that area. And that's what the intent of those hours are for. The hours for each one of them are so that developing fire protection engineer can spend time in those specific areas to develop as a well-rounded fire protection engineer, as I mentioned. Not someone well-developed in smoke management like James Milkey, specifically in smoke management, or any of those others that I could provide credentialing for or mention their credentials in specific areas. This is a basic area, basic level of knowledge. Experience. Utilizing the academic knowledge alone is not sufficient to reach the level of competency defined by the document. Experience is an essential element in the development of a competent engineer, and that's why the hours and time working towards it, not just having the academic teaching and fundamentals is identified. So the hours that are reflected are not the hours it takes to get the academics behind the fundamentals. The hours spent are hours spent actually working in those specific areas. Okay, next slide. I think there's 21. I think I saw somebody kind of paging through there. I think there's 21 slides, and they go quicker. Ethics, obviously, should be experience. What type of experience? Effective experience in diverse and progressive complexity. Working with variety projects and tasks and responsibilities. Getting interactive feedback from other professionals outside of fire protection engineering, structural engineers, HVAC engineers, electrical engineers, so on and so forth. To provide an interactive feedback during that experience. Interactive feedback, like I mentioned, it includes peers, clients, authorities have jurisdiction, provides knowledge and reinforces anyone that's worked in a specific area, and you find out who all the stakeholders are, and you've had to collaborate with them. You know what this looks like in feedback. Field experience is enhanced by earning specific credentials or certifications. Maybe they want to go through some of the NFPA training. There's some of the training that's available globally. FM training, there's some other areas that they can enhance their learning or work through certifications that are available, such as we talked about earlier, CSPS or other credentialing organizations. Okay, next slide. Reaching, I think that was right there.
Yeah, I think you skipped the ethics.
There. So ethics, obviously, professional conduct of engineers is of most importance. Ethics ensures that engineers are held accountable for their actions and that keeping interests of public clients, employers, colleagues, and profession in mind. So the SFPE canon of ethics is available on the website. It is expected that all fire protection engineers pull that down, understand, accept, and abide by it within the profession of fire protection engineering, or at least something that mirrors or is equivalent to that. That's coming from me. If you're not involved with SFPE, maybe you're in the National Fire Protection Association, National Fire Protection Engineers, and some of the other groups that are forming based on trying to work through intercontinental fire protection engineering relations, at least adhere to the ethics code there. Next one, reaching competency. As I mentioned earlier, and this is just a rehash on some of those things too, reaching competency. So an educational background must include the math, science, engineering basics, and other general electives when pursuing a career in fire protection engineering. This is the fire protection engineering side. This is the part where we're drawing the line in the sand associated with engineering, not the specialist, and we're looking at the engineering aspects of it. Fire protection engineers may follow different paths to reach the competent level of practice, although it's important to understand the path to minimum technical competency may vary from one to another. University programs are ideal mechanisms to provide fundamental grounding in engineering knowledge. And I've actually highlighted that within the document too, is that that's the preferred method. It's not the only method. There's especially in fire protection engineering, as we all know, there's usually more than one way to reach a solution. The document doesn't limit or prescribe the precise means. As I mentioned to you, it's not a prescriptive document, but a recommendation. It's a document that can be used by many and educationally, employers, practicing engineers to develop, as well as mentoring and growing junior engineers as well. Regardless of how foundational knowledge is obtained, obtaining the minimum competency must include the observed and verified professional practice outside of the traditional classroom. We've got to get engineers in the field, working with it, touching the system, looking at the systems, understanding their actions and the operations of those that are around them, to ensure that the knowledge and application is practical, and to help them to reach a competency. Okay, next slide. Maintaining, as I mentioned to you before, we continue professional development. There's many different ways to go through it. These are just highlighting on some of the points that I made earlier in the presentation. Developing and maintaining a lot of knowledge and skill and expertise should be part of your ongoing effort within the practice of fire protection engineers. This just goes on to provide the relevant training, professional development programs, mentoring, and independent research practitioners can remain competent through education on new technologies, new methodologies, and improved ways of designing a fire safe world. We need to be ethical engineers and stay up to speed, growing. We're either growing or we're dying. Number 19. Next slide. Next steps. Continue to review and revise the document based on further understanding of the global field. As I mentioned to you, this was the original draft. This was the original presentation that was put together by the group and provided to the Society of Fire Protection Engineers and the various different contributing organizations. And so it will continue to grow. The objective is to increase the awareness of fire protection engineering field. To identify some of the minimum competencies of a practicing fire protection engineer, to proliferate what it takes to get there, some idea of hours that it might take to get there in general, and to try to establish a canon or a standard that might be recognized or accepted throughout and globally, throughout the United States and globally, associated with a practicing fire protection engineer. It's not meant to be a specialization or a SME or even a well-experienced and diverse fire protection engineer, but one that might be used at the beginning of your career. Contact persons and organizations that would be interested in the document to help proliferate the field of fire protection engineering. Some people are not aware of fire protection engineering and its existence. Even though we've been around for, I think we're now 35 years old. I know it's over 25 years old, but we might be right at about 35 years now. So we're still a young engineering profession, but we cut across almost every engineering activity that exists. So providing that feedback and influence on how fire protection affects engineering in the engineering world, it helps. By providing this document to show that the fire protection engineering fundamentals of academic excellence and the development of an engineer and the minimum competencies that are considered to be applicable or recommended by the Society of Fire Protection Engineers helps to proliferate the professionalism in the engineering specialty of fire protection engineering. Next step, just acknowledging that the different committees that participated in the development of this document. Next slide. The SFPE Subcommittee on Professional Competency and Credentialing, they're always looking for additional participants. And there are task teams that are formed on each one of those different areas that I mentioned to you and that you saw on the slide, and the development of hours to identify what are the minimum core competencies within each of those subject matters that a fire protection engineer should look into. What are the areas that they should become familiar with, that they should have experience with within those four major categories and their subcategories. So that's the work that's going on right now. Reviews from the International Fire Protection Engineering Community. So from time to time, you will see this document be posted, just like the performance base has been for input and feedback. We definitely grow by getting that feedback and input, and also special recognition to the SFPE Subcommittee on Higher Education for looking over the document and ensuring that this one is not replacing, but an asset to their document in the development of higher education. Last slide would be questions. So at this, I'm going to mute my phone and listen to the question, and then I'll ask. So does anyone have a question out there?
Tom Ellison.
Yeah, the numbers you gave for the hours necessary, if you had a 40-hour work week and you distributed perfectly, you'd be able to do those hours in like 44 weeks up to about a year, minimum, maximum. What's the normal number of years they would expect before you'd be considered a competent fire protection engineer?
That's one question we actually parsed. Let me, it's my speaker again. That was parsed associated with the comparison to our NESIS professional engineers exam, and whether or not we were trying to add to, supplement to, or take away from any type of certifications that this might be misconstrued as. Again, this is not being listed as a micro-credential yet. And in taking the hours in, I do recognize, yes, you're right. It's about, I think it was 44 months or so, something like that, it would come out. So it's not quite 4 years, whereas the NESIS examination schedule is 4 years as a fire protection engineer, at least 3 of which will encompass responsible charge of fire protection systems.
No, actually, it came out to be 44 weeks.
About 44 weeks.
Up to like 50 some weeks.
Using the minimum number?
Using the minimum to maximum, it's somewhere between 44 and 50 something.
Okay. As I mentioned, it's not used to replace, and it doesn't meet the requirements of being an engineer ready to sit for the fire protection engineer professional examination.
So Will,
I don't think I
Tom's
fully
question.
answered the question. What I'm trying to get to is the fact that when developing these hours, it was selected each individually, and the question was posed to the group: what are the minimum number of hours that you would work in addition to your academic work? If the academic work's not done, that academic work should be worked in. It's separate from these hours right here. But the time working with heat transfer, the time working with fire chemistry, the time working with fire dynamics, and so on and so forth for each one of these parts, I think you're looking at I'm looking at slide 13. If you want to go to slide 13.
Give me 10 seconds.
13, 1, 3. So, Tom, I think I've gotten to the point where I provide the explanation that it's not meant to replace the 4 years required to sit for the PE. This is a level that helps to develop the minimum core competencies of a practicing fire protection engineer that's growing and developing in their area or their role or responsibility.
So this is
doesn't necessarily apply across globally.
So this is SFPE's definition of the experience an engineer should have, but is it not intended to be sent to states as they determine whether or not somebody can sit for the PE?
No, they haven't base with Denise's to try to change their definition of who should sit for the exam.
Okay.
If that helps to answer that question.
Yeah.
Hey, Will, this is Steve. I got a question. How did the committees balance between academia and field experience as to ensure that there's a proper balance?
Okay, so I'm not going to tell you that I'm an expert in all areas. This is one of the areas that was taken on by the task team to do the comparison of the EU certification and our fire protection engineering curriculum using the higher education curriculum. And they went through and combined these, and they looked at these being the times and the hours required to help develop those competencies. Did I answer your question?
So sort of, where I'm trying to get to is in your acknowledgement, you had the subcommittee on higher education. And I know you're on a subcommittee. So how do you balance between academics, what they perceive as a requirement or a need versus everyday field activity? And how do they balance that?
Yeah, so I would recommend, I've only seen it happen once, is the representative from the higher education committee came and participated in one of ours in the development of this document, CPQ, and vice versa. I don't think the transition or the collaboration is going nearly as much as it needs to for the next edition.
Yeah, I guess where I'm at is I know there's a performance-based modeling occurring that's being developed for the human behavioral aspects and various evacuation analysis, ASET, RSET, those types of things. But, you know, just to say 160 to 200 hours doesn't necessarily make you competent if you don't have the fundamental background at a lower level. And that's where I was trying to understand.
Okay, so definitely, I agree with that. And the comment back on that was, because we did have that as a comment to the committee when we were developing this and the number of hours in our first revision, and the public, we asked the public to comment back on it. And the response is that this was a number that is out there to give a core competency or a minimum core competency, not an expert level, such as like maybe the experience that you're expecting for that individual that you just described.
Okay, so in the follow-up, I know Erica and several others published a book recently on a new model for human behavior and response. Do you foresee that being kind of increased or integrated a little more with the performance-based design and the analysis aspects?
So sorry guys, I have to mute this each time to answer the question to make sure. So if you talk in between, I don't hear that. So yes, I think it will be added as a recommended reading. We did provide some recommended references and as in the development of this document, and we actually are continuing to develop recommended readings for the document as well. I think Tom's got one.
And Steve, if I can also maybe help answer that a little bit, the subcommittees. So like Will mentioned, there are several more subcommittees that have been created. Every one of those core competencies and how they break out, they've created little subcommittees to further delve into what the core competencies are, to gain knowledge and experience in order to practice in that arena. And so I volunteered. I'm on the performance-based design subcommittee. I know SFPE they're looking for volunteers on several of the other subcommittees, and it's going to be up to the subcommittee to determine what is going to be required to develop your core competencies there.
Absolutely. They're also open to changing the number of hours if necessary.
Right. Will, that kind of ties into another question I had. if SFPE is saying this is the minimum core competency to practice fire protection engineering, I mean, that sounds a lot like the minimum core competencies and requirements to be a PE. When you're developing the test questions, SFP is very engaged in all of this, and maybe this is where a little confusion comes from in the industry, at least on this call, maybe, is that SFP, we're really engaged in writing questions for NCES. We've been doing it every year, except this past year because of COVID, but we've done it every year for many years, writing questions for the PE exam. And that's one of the things they really drive home at the question development process, is that we're tasked with creating questions that are the minimum core competencies of an FPE are expected to answer. So how was that brought up in the development of this, and how it relates to the PE exam? Is this getting into fire protection and working under a PE that you could work somewhat autonomously but still under the direction of a licensed engineer? Was any of that discussed at all? Am I asking the right question? Does it make sense?
Direct question first. So if everybody's trying to jump in, give me a second because I put everything on mute so that I can convey without getting the echo. Yes, the conversation associated with the way that NESIS provides credentialing, the questions that you ask, the minimum core competencies, the time it takes to reach that 4-year mark with 3 years of diverse charge of systems and things of that nature. We went through this, and in almost every case, the answer came back of this is not for NESIS. So the answer is this is not for NESIS. This is for an entry-level fire protection engineer to begin their trade development, so to speak, after they've achieved their academic foundation, however traditional or non-traditional that may be, but to begin working through, if I were to say it as a new employee in fire protection engineering, that's what this document is really suggesting or recommending for the hours and the time and the elements to become aware of, or to begin building your proficiency in. The subcommittee that you mentioned, those are the ones that are going to talk about elements of performance-based design, looking at risk and things. Smoke management, they might looking into fluid flow and heat transfer, buoyancy, and evacuation analysis, typical reactions of personnel when they're walking up, that'd be in human behavior. So particular pieces and elements come out of the subcommittees, like you answered Stephen's question on. Those will help to adapt and adopt and help to adjust some of these numbers that are originally sent out there as, okay, this is the first swag at getting base numbers for a new fire protection engineer to become aware of and understand these aspects to begin practicing fire protection engineer. If once they reach once they reach the end results of all of these, then they'll have a fairly diverse and specific competency in fire protection engineering, particularly not electrical engineering or mechanical, but in fire protection engineering, that they can begin that practicing. So globally, they don't apply to NESIS. So the requirements for the NESIS aren't recognized in Spain. They're not recognized in EU or anywhere else. So the way that these are developed are keeping that in mind, even though we have a more regimented requirement and question writing like you have for the NESIS to develop those base core competencies. Does that help?
Hey, Will, this is Tom Allison. There's two pathways to get to be a fire protection engineer in practice. One is to go through school and graduate with that kind of degree. Another is to get an engineering degree and then grow into a fire protection engineer through experience and further education. Are these numbers that you have on the recommended hours based on including your academic hours or not?
They're not including the academic hours.
Say that again?
They are not including the academic hours. you go back to slide 8, on slide 8, give me just a second to get there. Hey, Rob, can you go to slide 8? There we go. So you'll see that in tier 2, the general academics is prepared along the career path. So, if, say for example, I can use myself as an example. So I develop my learning skills through life in tier 1 as I'm developing in tier 2 with my general academics and chemical engineering. I go and start working in a workplace and develop some of these workplace skills and so on and so forth. I enter the development as an engineer, and I continue to work through professional ethics and applying politics and economics and public policy. But then I make the transition to fire protection. I've got to have some level to base what I'm going to build as for my fire protection engineering career. Tier 5, which is what this document is, and those hours that you see are on top of those academic and experiential developments. Did that help, Tom?
Yeah, that helps. But if, let's say you came right out of school with a master's degree in fire protection engineering, and you went into the industry, someone that came out of school with a undergrad in electrical engineering, the same amount of hours working towards this would apply to both. Is that correct? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yeah, so unfortunately, the way the document is currently derived, it doesn't take into consideration higher levels or graduate levels of education at this time. And that type of graduate level education is available in the U.S. and not globally. The intent was this was to be a global type document.
Understood.
So I do see some of the comments that are over on the side that we have to be very careful with. Let me tell you, as an engineer that's on the same road as you all here, associated with our requirements under the U.S., the NESIS requirements that we have, the licensing requirements that you all are working with out in industry, as well as the way we work under a firm at the Savannah River site, all of these questions and concerns like being in a risky territory associated with the way this document is developed, I've actually put them out there, and I received the same responses back that this had to be at a minimum level of core competencies that someone outside the U.S. could accomplish the same way someone inside the U.S. could accomplish. We set the bar pretty high in the U.S. Folks, I'm willing to take back anything you want to express to as a concern. Please know that.
Yeah, well, if I can maybe speak out a little bit, I think a major
I guess it
difference
maybe
is-
needs to be more clear that this is an alternate path or a path for other than the United States, because it does seem to be a departure from SFPE's focus on getting more people licensed.
anything in here about licensing. In fact, it tries to, on purpose, avoid the discussion of licensing. So I'll take that back to the committee. That's what I want to emphasize. And I'll utilize the statement you made associated with their push towards licensing and credentialing fire protection engineers here.
You know, Will, there is a program, I'm sure you've seen it, that is an International Masters in Fire Safety Engineering that is through Ireland and Brussels and London and all those places, even Australia. So I'm not following why we can't take some of that and apply these into this if they have the masters and undergraduate in those areas.
Okay, so I hear that as another comment towards we should make sure this document addresses or incorporates the application of higher level education toward the successful completion of these competency hours. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, because I don't know how you can really, on some of them, if you don't have the additional education and or experience or both, preferably, I don't know how you can be really competent in the more detailed or advanced areas.
I got it. So that's one I'll take back. So if you look at the last page, not on the presentation, but when you have a minute that you all can read this document, you'll see on one of the last pages, it actually identifies that this document and the contributors came from Spain, the U.S., Switzerland, New Zealand, Japan. So there's a very diverse group whereby we couldn't just apply the NESA standards or the minimum competencies, because the NESA just says 4 years, 3 years, and then the ABET accredited, so on and so forth. And Switzerland, they don't have that level of comparison towards professional development, nor Japan, New Zealand, things of that nature. It is a challenge, and I'm taking back these comments so that we can continue to edify. This is a global document, not just one applicable to the U.S., and maybe even put the nomenclature out there that it's not intended to replace NESAs. And that level of, what's the word I'm looking for, the level of certification toward licensure.
Will, I think that the way the document is currently presented makes it look like there's really one primary way in which you can be an FPE. But as we know, there are multiple paths to get the experience and or education. And I mean, I don't know what the answer is, but if the revised document can somehow recognize the multiple paths to grow into fire protection and gain the requisite knowledge and or experience, that would prove to be the greatest value to our industry. It's clear they were trying to be multicultural, and you know, by being very generic, it becomes difficult to use. And I that's definitely the challenge that you guys have in that committee. I wish you luck, my friend. But if you can somehow recognize
that's exactly right. So
yeah,
in the scope statement, they actually state, by clearly identifying the areas in which SFPE believes fire protection engineers must be competent, and the degree to which practitioners use the term fire protection engineer with the understanding and expectations identified in this document. This document provides an additional means through which the profession of fire protection engineering can be recognized with status and importance internationally. It just avoids the NESAs, it avoids the licensure and the statements like we talked about. I agree. More than one path.
and the difficulty is recognizing that in some cultures, in some countries, You don't
So how would
call
this
yourself an
be
engineer.
used in another country? I mean, like Japan are there societies over there gonna try to enforce this, or would it become adopted by a local government over there?
So there are several different answers to that. One of them is especially with the recent loss and fires and the explosion like there was recently in the port, there's a lot of emphasis associated with fire protection engineering throughout the communities. The EU covers like 26 different countries, and they're applying their rules and regulations, so to speak, like we have our ICC requirements. There are different organizations, international fire protection organizations that are being recognized for fire protection engineering. What they have or what they don't have to set the mark as to what's a fire protection engineer and what's not is not present. They'll utilize statements associated with NFPA, what the SFPE has for our professional member grade. So they'll try to use the NESIS, but they don't have the same level of programs to provide the licensure of fire protection engineers in those locations. Japan, for example. Japan has its own set of codes, where it has codes, because there's not a lot. And that level of fire protection engineering, say for structural engineer, fire protection engineer competency. You can utilize several different resources to try to gain that.
But the risk is that you can't be everything to everybody, and you got to know where that line is for that other discipline to take over. Yes, we need to know from the fire side, but you know, I've seen employers imply that because we can do mechanical, electrical, whatever, that we have the same basis as an electrical engineer and mechanical, and that's simply not a fact with everybody, at least from my perspective.
Very good point. So even on one of those task teams, we had to go through an educational period with a structural engineer who was providing feedback during our passive fire protection engineering tasks, who felt that a fire protection engineer had no business making a call on materials and maybe even a structure, materials and construction. So we had to go through the handoffs and the interfaces that a fire protection engineering has to have with the structural group to obtain fire-rated walls or fire-rated barriers, potential impacts to that wall that could cause it to fail, and things of that nature. So that task group had to develop its own bullets underneath that specific element of study. I don't know if that's helpful, but it may have helped you to understand that it's not a finished document. We've got these four major categories. We've got sub-tiers within them. And as Rob mentioned, there are subgroups that are helping to build those elements within those sub-tiers as what should be understood or known or developed as a competency. And then those build back into this larger document.
Yeah, I guess where I was trying to get to is, you know, there's other societies out there or other, like, you know, the civil engineering and all that, that maybe could provide some input for their specific areas to the committees.
Absolutely. And they are reaching out, those sub-tiered subcommittees within the major categories here. I use the example of that structural engineer being invited to participate with that passive fire protection task group. Mine for explosion prevention, we have someone in the UK that's been associated with process explosion prevention that's coming in to talk and making sure that we don't cross the lines or where the interface is that needs to take place within that sub-tier group.
I agree.
Will, are there any other disciplines that have a similar document, competency document?
I've seen various discussions associated with competencies, but it's not established like this. For example, in electrical engineering, there's sub-tiers that have been developed. They're just whole levels of engineering, academics, and such. For example, electrical engineering on big wire or small wire, whether it's working printed circuit boards or instrumentation and control. So they're whole categories that could be comparable to the way that we're trying to identify core competencies here. As an electrical engineer, you know about instrument uncertainty, and you know about set point accuracy of instrument and systems and interaction and big items. That's what this document is trying to cover. But there are whole fields of study that are developed out of those sub-tier elements. And the answer that finally is yes. This drawing that you see right here on this slide, this tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, actually comes from another study on competency and how they interface within a business.
Let's say you were going to be specialized in something. Let's say you were going to be specialized in gaseous suppression systems or something. Would this be a minimum to get you to the starting point for that? Or would you be able to go to that specialist category, be really competent in that one area, and call yourself a FPE?
Okay, so this is applied globally now. Remember, not to just the U.S. This being a minimum core competencies to practice in fire protection engineer. If you want to become a specialist, you're going to have a lot more hours under fire suppression systems and gaseous specifically under the fire protection systems. So you could develop a whole career and work in that specific area of gaseous fire suppression systems. But as a canon or a standard, what they're trying to establish is this would be a base document for any fire protection engineer.
Will, has there been any discussion on better defining where this fits into the U.S. definition of an FPE and our regulatory system, you know, being a PE and all that?
Yes, so it's a separate task. I'm not part of it. Right now, they're still focused on the global effect or the application globally. I echo the concern, and it's only tabled on the side for right now. What I see a lot of is SFPE applying itself as a globally applicable association versus specific only to the U.S. Does this applicability to the U.S. have a place? Absolutely, and I think it needs to be developed. But I don't see a task team working yet.
What about the International Fire Engineers organization? Are they were partnering with SFPE for a while? Are they being worked within this confines for the worldwide program?
Excellent comment. And mine that I take back to the committee as well. I happen to see a lot of activity in the International Fire Engineers Association recently in the application of various different activities at that level. We'll just say that. I have not seen the interaction of the International Fire Engineers within the SFP development of this document.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that would be a global partnership that could flourish for both parties to develop something like this and be recognized by both their membership and our membership, you know?
Absolutely. and I echo that 100%. One of the other areas in the task group I have is looking at the international governance, let's say, associated with fire protection engineering requirements. So that meets like what Mark was saying, or what Rob was asking about, associated with application in Japan. I'm trying to find out what they're applying in Japan. The International Fire Engineers Association provides that medium to begin finding out a lot more of these things. I know a lot more about the EU than I do in some of the other locations, like Switzerland or New Zealand.
But when I looked at the EU standards, like you said, they're mirroring a lot of ours, just different numbers and different names. But theirs is a lot more performance based, which is, you know, what you talked about earlier under the fire safety analysis aspects. And then you go down to like New Zealand or Australia, and even Japan, they're more into the performance based than the US is. We tend to be more of a, you know, a prescriptive based society right now.
That's correct.
Hey guys, it's we're sitting at about 20 minutes after. We've gone a little bit over, so we can keep this going. But I just want to let everyone know we go well beyond the hour. We should probably wrap it up pretty soon.
First of all, before everybody goes, I do want to thank everybody. I know it's a little controversial. I know it's a lot controversial with the aspect of applying this core competencies to fire protection engineering in the area of the field in which we work. It's a first of its kind that is being tried to apply uncategorically across the field of fire protection engineering. And I think that for the first document, we've gotten a pretty good hit off. We just have to work on our way in our travel and what we're trying to accomplish like someone else would. Then in addition to that, we need to consider how it's being applied in the U.S. associated with our current requirements for certification and licensing. Sorry, some of my words were selected. I'm dealing with the echo again, so I'm trying to talk back what I go on.
So Rob, can we get the membership based on the survey to give us a little more fidelity to what they're looking for presentations based on Mr. Cosey's presentation?
Absolutely. I'll put together another survey and I will send it out tonight or tomorrow. So we'll send that out. We'll be open for another week and a half, 2 weeks, maybe a little bit longer. We'll have our community event, our social event next month, and then we'll go from there. How does that sound, Steve?
That's great. I would just ask that they be a little more specific if they got comments of what they're looking for specifically based on this.
Yep. Yeah, we're hoping to have a little discussion, but we've gone a little long today. So that's quite all right. I'll send out another survey and see if we can get some more information from our peeps. So I guess with that, Will, thank you very much for presenting this evening. Thank you everyone for chiming in and helping out. Mark, for being willing to act as the intermediary, for carrying Will's voice to your computer. That was actually pretty awesome. And everyone else for chipping in and helping out. This was an awesome collective effort. I couldn't have done it without everyone. So thank you. And Will, thank you for volunteering your time to present on this topic. It was very important. And as you can see, there's a lot of discussion. So look for that survey coming up in the next day or two. And I guess we'll go from here. Thank you for everyone for showing up and participating. It was a really great conversation. And no comment back. So I guess I'm going to log off. So you all have a great night. Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good night, all.